top of your class for over 20 years, and when you beat the guy, you feel like you've won the race, and it might have been first round. If you beat him, you feel like you've won the race, so you're actually going to some of these races hoping to beat Don Garlits.
This is Big Daddy Don Garlits, the personal side, the one nobody sees. This is the story of a true American hero and a living legend, a man who has looked death in the eye and survived horrific crashes, devastating explosions, and fires in a 260-mile-per-hour landlocked missile. The drag strip, the King's Domain, where Big Daddy has ruled for over 30 years, and this is Donald Garlits with wife Pat at home.
Savannah, Georgia. Very dark night, just before Interstate 95.
Before interstates.
Driving through the swamps of Georgia, and bam!
The wheel broke at the axle and came off the truck, which meant there was no brakes because that let the brake shoes be exposed. The truck was a GMC carryall, and it veered to the left and went down into a 30-foot canal full of water with the dragster on the back, on the trailer, open trailer. And we were carrying a spare engine behind the seat, behind the driver's seat, attached to that sheet metal floor with like 3/8 bolts. And we had a bunk up in the back, and Connie Swingle and his little boy, 6-year-old boy Teddy, were asleep in the bunk when this accident occurred. When the truck hit the water, you know, that's an impact of a cushiony type impact, but it tore that engine loose from the sheet metal floor, and it drove the seat forward off the runners. And of course, it's down on about a 30-degree angle, the nose of the truck, into the deeper part of the canal. So that meant that the weight of the engine, you got to remember, 392 engine, steel, is laying against the seat, and the seat's against me, got me pinned in between the dash and the seat on the driver's side. And he had to go underwater to push the seat forward and raise the weight of that 392 engine. That took superhuman strength, you can imagine. 30-degree angle, underwater, total darkness, working by voice and feel.
And right now the water's at your neck.
That's when I got free, the water was at my neck.
You miraculously get out, dead silence like the Titanic had just sunk.
Exactly, just a few bubbles were coming out.
15-mile walk into town.
Yeah, to Savannah.
Tow truck.
Yep. Yeah, Swingle had to dive down in the water and find out, because we saw the marks coming off the road, but it was actually further down. It was almost like it hydroplaned on the canal a little while before it went in. So finally, after about a half an hour, Swingle has the tow rope attached to the front of the truck underwater. And so they placed the wrecker up crossways. It's on like a levee. And the wrecker's up on the levee, and it's jacking the rig out. And believe it or not, it wasn't hurt very bad. And it's pulling the whole thing up out of the canal, and it's just about up the bank, and the dragster's still on the trailer, and the trailer's still hooked to the car. It's all waterlogged, but it's still all there. And down the road, we hear this noise. It's a car coming at about 100 miles an hour. And Swingle and I run down the road toward it. We're waving our hands frantically, trying to get it to stop, because the wrecker is completely across the road. It is not even slowing this car down. It zooms by us, and Tommy Porter, who was at the controls of the wrecker running everything, sees it's going to hit him. So he releases the brake on the wrecker, and it rolls back, starts to roll back. The car sideswipes the front of the wrecker in the one lane. It's just a 2-lane road. And of course, it hits the wrecker, and that disorientates Porter. He releases the brakes completely. The truck goes back down into the canal, and the big old wrecker goes right down on top of it all. Cruncho, everything is in the canal, and just the front of the wrecker stuck up out of the water now. And it's another 15-mile walk back to Savannah to get a big wrecker.
Now that sounds like a Keystone Cops
It was Keystone Cops, but I'll tell you what, the sad part about it was no insurance. The race car was our only means of income. We had no tow truck, no trailer, no race car. we were out of business. And the night before at Savannah, we just set the fastest and quickest time in the history of the sport. It just goes to show you how quick your life can change from a high to a super low.
It's drag racing's early days, and Don Garlits is the new hot shoe in the Southeast. The man from Tampa, nicknamed the Swamp Rat, is the terror of the drag strip, which in those days was usually an abandoned airstrip. It was the days of the slingshot dragster, a homemade car, basically frame rails, 4 tires, and a supercharged engine. The driver perched behind the nitromethane-fed power plant with his legs straddling the transmission and clutch. The long tube chassis had a straight front axle with the gas tank bolted on top and had to be push-started. It was a real crowd pleaser. Everyone came out to see the rails. The slingshots came in many different shapes and sizes. It was the rung what you brung era, anything goes. Drivers would be paired for eliminations and the starter would wave a flag to start the race. The slingshots were very unpredictable. Wheel stands off the line to smoking the tires the entire length of the track. Drag racing, the all-American sport. These are the early years, the formative years, the run-what-you-brung era of the slingshot dragsters. And the name on everyone's lips is Big Daddy. Garlits writes history as he smashes every track record coast to coast and pioneers major innovations that transform the sport. A fire burnout, a showstopper, and a great way to heat the rear tires for better traction. Up to this time, in the late 50s, there had never been a fire or explosion in these cars, but as speeds increased, the danger grew closer. A driver's worst nightmare, the unforeseen enemy and killer of many drag racers, fire. The first recorded fire and explosion occurred in Chester, South Carolina in 1959 to none other than the Swamp Rat himself. Drivers had never worn anything but a plain shirt when they raced, but on that day, wife Pat had given Don a leather jacket, which ironically saved his life.
I had watched him in the T-shirt and just kept thinking that if anything ever did go wrong and he turned over, I used to think of you turning over in the car or something, how you just, your arms would just be ruined. And so I bought him the leather jacket, mainly as a protection for turning upside down or crashing.
Skin abrasions.
Skin abrasions.
Not fire. No one ever, there'd never been a fire in drag racing. We had no idea such an enemy existed. I put a nice load of nitro in it and zipped off down through there, and just as I entered the traps, the blower backfired. I guess we floated a valve or something. Anyway, it backfired in the manifold, and I was just engulfed in these horrible hot flames, and they wouldn't go away. They just were there. I lapsed into semi-consciousness, and when I did that, my foot must have relaxed on the throttle. And when I did that, it shut the valve off.
Now, you had no gloves on at the time.
No gloves
your hand
and
was
no
on the
face
left brake.
mask. I had on a special set of aviator goggles which saved my eyes. In the back of my mind, for some reason, I had always thought that burns like that would never heal, and I figured that I was probably going to die. I'd heard that from different people that, you know, when you're burned seriously like that, you know, you never heal and you die from blood poisoning, and that's all I kept thinking about. I've finally done something to myself that even though I'm alive right now, I may not survive. And little did I know that was very close to the truth. I was in severe pain. I'm telling you, really pain, because my hands were burned, my face was burned, my arms, my legs. But I wanted to call my wife Pat because I really had a funny feeling that I might not make it. So I wanted to get her up there to Chester. So I told her over the phone that we'd had a little flash fire in the pits, nothing serious, but to get on a plane or a bus or train or something and get up to South Carolina. She was pregnant at the time.
And there he was in bed. His nose was just black like a charred marshmallow. And he had tubes in his arms. And it was just terrible. It was a horrible shock. I hadn't expected anything that serious. I mean, I knew if he wanted me there that he had been burned, but I didn't dream that it was that bad. And then the head nurse got me to the side, and she said, well, if he makes it the next 72 hours, everything's going to be all right. And so here we were now facing a life and death situation.
After being in that hospital a few weeks, the left hand, which had been burned so severely by being held on that brake handle, it didn't show signs of recovering, and it was already starting to draw up, like into a ball like that, and grow that way. And so the doctor said it would never be any good again, so he'd like to take that hand off because it looked like there was infection setting in. And I said, I want to leave the hand on. I didn't care. That I would rather be dead than have my hand taken off. And at that point, I really meant it. They unbandaged my hands, and they were drawn up into knots, and he just stretched the fingers right out straight, and just the blood just popped out of them, you know, because he just broke the skins. He wanted to get those joints limbered up. And so he put me in surgery the very next day, and scrubbed all that rotting flesh off, and kept my hands in a saline solution, then underwater, submerged, for another 4 or 5 weeks, and all the skin began to grow back. My brother was at the shop, running the shop, and he was selling the parts, the engines. I had quit. All of the Chrysler engines were being sold to different people around the city, and of course that's when Art Malone came on the scene. Well, Art had only ever driven round track cars, and I didn't know whether he could drive a fuel dragster or not. But I agreed to give him a try at it. He did seem sincere and aggressive and young and wanted to go places. So when we got out of the hospital, we rebuilt the Swamp Rat and had to change it around considerably because he was much taller than I was. And we took him over to Kissimmee, and it took to it like a duck to water. Within a couple of runs, Art was driving it just as good as anybody. Yeah, in November of 1957, the Swamp Rat won. It wasn't even called a Swamp Rat yet. It was just the Don's Garage. And it went up to Brooksville, Florida, and went 176 miles an hour. And it was the first dragster to exceed 170. In fact, it broke the Speed Sports record of 169.11 that they had set a month earlier at the Davis Mountain Air Force Base in Tucson, Arizona. We went out of Florida. We raced all over the country. We won races. We won the NHRA National Championships. We set track records from one end of this country to the other. We won 50 straight match races that year, and we were getting tremendous publicity. It was like a Cinderella story. Here was a nobody from September of 1957 to September of 1958 was becoming a national figure in drag racing.
How did you get the name Swamp Rat? When did that come about?
The Swamp Rat came about when I started driving his car and went to 18366 in Sanford, Maine. Seto Pastorian was there. But anyway, we outrun Seto, and Seto called Don the Swamp Rat, called me a green kid, and said, you know, if you guys would come to California, he said, in front of the world, I want to outrun. So we went out there, and of course Seto didn't show up. The promoter had advertised this big match race, and Seto wasn't there. But all the Southern California killer cars, the Chrisman and Cannons, and the Sear and Hoppers, and all the real top flight cars were there.
What year was this?
This would be 1959.
They had a 16-car field of fuel cars, and I showed up and competed in that event and won the event. It was still flag starts. They didn't even have Christmas trees yet.
The promoter asked, would we run these guys one at a time? I said, sure.
Bring them the whole field?
The whole field, one at a time. So I brought them up there, and we eliminated every car they had, anybody that wanted to race. Now, I'm talking about now the guys that had been world record holders. Art Chrisman with the Chrisman and Cannon Hustler 1, which was the car. Sear and Hopper, I mean, unbeatable. That's where they threw beer cans at Don. See, when he would follow me down in the Cadillac, the push car, they were throwing beer cans at him, and we just loved it, you know. The California took a liking to us shortly thereafter. That proved to them that there was no phony baloney to it.
We didn't talk about what we were going to do or who we were going to outrun. We did it and let them talk about it afterwards.
Lions Drag Strip, Long Beach, California, March 8th, 1970, the day that changed Don Garlett's life forever. Garlett's on the line in the final round, pops the clutch, and the car explodes in a fireball.
Well, that was a terrible time, because just moments after that accident, as they took me out of the car, I saw my foot was blown away, and I had enough sense to know it wasn't anything magic going to be putting it back on there. It was severe pain, I mean excruciating pain beyond description, and everybody was in total chaos. A lot of people were on the starting line. People were screaming and hollering. There was somebody was screaming out of the stands, and they slammed the ambulance door on the remains of that foot that was still hanging by a couple of tendons. Still had some nerves hooked to it, I might add. And they had to open that door back up and release that piece and throw it inside with me. At that point, I wondered if it was all worth it. And little did I know, I figured my career was over, and all that I had done had brought me to this point, and I was going to be a cripple for the rest of my life. And little did I know that it wasn't even the beginning of a career.
Prior to that, though, let me tell you, the cars had gotten faster and faster, and the engines were in front of the driver, and constantly transmissions were exploding, clutches, oil fires in their face, and it was like they were riding on a time bomb set to go off, and you just didn't know when. And it was the scariest thing. It had, for a sport that had started out to be such a pleasure and so much fun, it had turned into a nightmare for me.
Look at the guys that got killed.
And so many of them had gotten killed.
Robinson, Sorokin, Mulligan.
And it was all from the same thing, from that engine being in front of that driver and causing all these things to happen, the explosions. So I lived in constant fear of the phone ringing on Sunday when I knew he was racing.
When you heard about that he lost his part of his right foot, what was that moment like?
The same as he said, just a very sinking feeling.
Because I told her over the phone that I'd lost my right foot.
So sad, and I just kept thinking, why? Why is it worth all this?
This is one time that I didn't want to quit. I figured if I lived to survive this thing, I would extinct the slingshot dragster that had killed so many of my friends. By the time that I regained my sense about me, they came with my pain medicine, and I didn't want to take it. So they sent the doctor down to me to talk to me about it. And Dr. Larson says, no, you don't have to take the pain medicine if you don't want to. He says, but I imagine in a couple of days you're going to take it, so it's here if you need it. So on about the third day, he was right. It was out of this world. So on this one particular night, the nurse comes down about 4 in the morning, and she says, we've changed your bedclothes once tonight. We're not changing them anymore. You'll get them changed at 10 o'clock in the morning with everybody else. She says, now, if you want your pain medicine, I got it right here for you. And I said, I'm not going to take my pain medicine. She says, good night, Mr. Garlitz. And so there I was. And I'm telling you, it was unbearable. I'm laying in an ice cold bed, it's wet, and my foot is just like you just taking an ice pick and just jobbing it in the thing. And I screamed out to God to help me. And he, in fact, did help me. He enveloped my body in this cocoon, and it was just like it was pure love. And that's why my cross says God is love, because I could just sense that love that he had for me. And he warmed me from that cold bed. He removed my pain. He gave me this feeling of well-being, of love, of being wanted, of being cared for. And it's a feeling that you have to experience to understand where I'm coming from.
This physically took place? You actually physically felt this?
I physically felt this thing, and it was as though I was raised right up out of that bed without any medication or anything. And that was for all practical purposes, that was the end of the pain from that thing I went through, with the exception of the mornings when Mr. Larson, Dr. Larson, would come down to the hospital with 17 stainless steel stitches in my foot, and he'd cut them with some dikes and pull them out. And when he did that, I would actually feel that.
When you actually, because, there are the doubters. There'll always be people
Let
who
them doubt. Let them doubt. I'm just telling you, that's what happened to me.
You reached out for the Lord, and what you're saying is, as soon as you asked for that, it came.
Almost immediately, within moments. But I'm telling you, you got to understand something. I cried out with the faith of a child, the same way your little boy Andrew would look at you and say, "Daddy." Now, he would expect help, right? I mean, he wouldn't be just saying that for TV or for somebody to hear him. I mean, if he was actually in agonizing pain and he reached up his hand for you, would he expect you to reach down if you were within reach? Well, I think that's what the key was. I was laying there in that hospital bed, and I reached out with the faith of a child to God and said, "Father." And I think he just reached down and got me.
And that day really changed your life forever.
Forever. I was not, I didn't, it was a thing that if you talk about it, even today, I'm sure people will look at this and hear me say this and think I'm some kind of a nut or a kook. You know, you know, they put you in the deal with the guy on the street corner preaching, you know, the kingdom of heaven is at hand, repent. Like John the Baptist, you know, you see them in the cities, and you know, people shun that, and I think I was still not ready to go public, and it took 7 years, believe it or not, for me to put the cross on my car from that encounter.
So you're in the hospital bed now, designing a rear-engine dragster. What made you think that you could be the guy to do this?
I don't know. I just had a gut feeling that it could be done. That it looked to me like it was. I had looked at some rear-engine cars that had been built, and I'd actually sat in them. And I just couldn't believe that anything that sat that nice and looked that good couldn't be made to handle. And plus, I had one other thing you got to remember. By this time, rear-engine cars had invaded Indianapolis. And they had said that no rear-engine car would ever get around the Indy 500, and yet the English built chassis that were able to do that. And I had that in the back of my head. I thought, if they can build a chassis go around the Indy 500, I ought to be able to build a chassis that can go in a straight line. My friends called me up and would tell me, didn't I know that every rear-engine dragster that ever been built turned right or left? In fact, I'd seen plenty of them turn right and left. Red Chase in 1957 at Houston almost ran over me with a rear-engine car. If I hadn't been so far in front of me, he would have crashed into me. They were not safe cars in that they didn't handle. They were safe cars for the driver. He had good visibility, but he couldn't drive the thing. There was not one rear-engine dragster ever built that went straight every run. We're building the rear-engine dragster from the sketches that I had drawn in the hospital in Long Beach. And we actually have it setting on the ground now on 4 wheels. And it was a racy looking thing. I'll never forget the first time I went and looked at it, walked in the shop, and there it was. And I got in it and sat in it, and it looked right. And I'll never forget, Swingle said, "It looks right, it must be right." And we couldn't wait to get to the drag strip with it. And boy, were we in for a surprise. The thing either turned right or left every time. And we went day after day to different drag strips. We went to Tampa Dragway. We went to St. Petersburg. We went to Orlando. We went everywhere. And it always did the same. It either turned right or left, didn't it?
It was an evil handling car.
We call it the evil handling little witch. And Swingle, he stuck by me. Tom Lemon stuck by me. They said, "We'll work on it, Big Daddy, as long as you think there's hope." And the phone would ring and they'd laugh. And I'll never forget it. I was at my lowest and I was talking to Pat. I said, "I guess we ought to give up on the thing." I said, "Even though it seems like it's a safe car as far as the driver safety is concerned," I said, "what good is it to be safe if you're going 215 miles an hour and the thing turns into the stands at the end?" I said, "That's not safe." I said, "Better take your chances with the clutches." And she says,
I have the quote right here.
"Go ahead."
She said, "Don, this is word for word now. Now we got to set the scene. You were very depressed."
Oh, I was ready. I was going to quit drag racing because I was not going to drive the slingshots anymore. My only hope to continue in the sport now was to have this rear-engine car where I could race with. I never thought it would be a winner. I just hoped that it would be competitive and maybe I'd get in a win once in a while.
So at the lowest point where Pat really had you, I mean, she could have made you quit.
She could have finished me. Yes, right.
That could have been it right then and there. And she had survived the Chester fire and the Golden Triangle and all the other little things here and there. So this was her moment.
All she had to do was say, "You're right, it's not worth the effort. Hang it up. Let's open the speed shop." Well, we had the speed shop. We had the big High Performance World. She said, "Let's just go to High Performance World, draw our salaries out of the company, and that'll be it." She could have done it, but she didn't.
She turns to you and says, "Don, you know how I feel. But if you believe in that car, don't listen to anybody else but yourself. Just keep trying. If anybody in the world can do it, you'll find a way to work it out." Well, you know, I read that, and I get chills right now when I think about it.
Well, I'm telling you, it brings tears to my eyes. I mean, I've heard that quote a dozen times. I'm sorry, I apologize, but it tugs at my heartstrings because she's the reason that I'm still here, still getting it. And it's the truth. So we went back out, we took a fresh new look at it, Swingle and I, and then I have to give Swingle credit for something here. We come back, we went out again and then went over to Orlando and the darn thing turned right or left. I don't know which way, it doesn't make any difference. It just, you go down the course and the car would make a little move and you pull the steering wheel and it would be too much. And so I told Swingle, we're riding back from Orlando, we're depressed again, And I said to Swingle, I said, you know, if I didn't know better, I think the steering was messed up. And he said, well, why do you say that? I said, well, you know, I can feel the car make a little move, and I go to correct it, and it's always too much. And Swingle says, well, why don't we slow the steering down? And I said back to him, I said, well, Swingle, it's got the same steering that the Slingshots had on it. It must be right. And he says, no, he says, that maybe that doesn't want the same kind of steering that the Slingshots have got. So we went back to the shop and changed the steering ratio and went back the next day to Orlando, and the car set the track record and went straight as an arrow. And that was it. It was over. The Dodge Ram Chargers would give seminars around the country. So they were over in Clearwater at a Dodge seminar giving a talk on, the guys were all there with their super stocks. And the guy holds his hand up and he says, you know that Big Daddy's over in Seffner building a rear engine car? He says, you know, he runs Dodge. What do you guys think about that? You think, and of course they were the killers with their candy apple slingshot Ram Charger. You know, they really set some good times with it. And the guy says, we think Big Daddy has finally bit off more than he can chew.
The Radical Car's debut came exactly 1 year later to the day at the same drag strip where the country's hottest slingshots were entered. Laughter and ridicule was the response Big Daddy got with his newfangled machine, but the last laugh was yet to come.
Well, the first thing they did, they pitted me right up by the gate so that everybody that came in the drag strip could be sure to see this funny-looking thing. And Prudhomme come in the gate, and he stopped his whole rig and blocked the gate and everything and got out of it and walked over to it. I mean, we're right at the gate, at the pit gate. Everybody else is pitted down in the pits. He looked at that thing, he said, well, Big, he says, I'll give you credit for one thing. It's one way to get publicity. In other words, don't win races, just do something weird. It was runner-up there at Long Beach, and it should have won, but you got to remember something. It was 1 year exactly to the day. It's the final round. I'm in the same lane. It's about the same time of day, and you talk about deja vu. That was it. And for a split second, as that light went yellow-green, I thought about that accident 1 year before, and I was late. I had the best ET, but Gary Cochran just left me at the gate, you know, like a beached flounder, and he outran me. Well, I got my confidence back. The car I knew it would handle. People weren't laughing so much anymore, and then 2 weeks later we went to Pomona to the Winter Nationals, and we won the event to become the first rear-engine dragster to ever qualify at a national event, and then finally even to win it. In other words, up to that point, no one had ever even qualified a rear-engine top fuel dragster at an NHRA event.
You've had a lot of shining moments like that. Where does that moment belong?
Oh, that's right up there at the top. Because it did a far greater thing than, it's not like just winning a race. This is something that's going to save lives. And I'd seen racers die. Really, you know, friends of ours, close friends, that died because of the front engine cars and the cars blowing up in their face. Or,
you know, they were killing 3 and 4 guys a year before that, and there's only been 3 or 4 killed in that entire length of time since that accident. And I don't even think that's correct. I think it's even less than that. Marvin Swartz is one, and maybe one or two other guys. And that's all I can think of. But no big name guys have been killed in these cars. They are absolutely safer. And try to understand the difference in the speed and elapsed time from them. There would be no way to drive a slingshot dragster today. It would be absolutely suicidal. There'd be no Shirley Muldowney. There'd be no Gary Becks. These people would be dead. I'd be dead. All of the big name guys would be dead if slingshots were still... NHRA would have had to have outlawed the class.
Well, yeah, there wouldn't be Top Fuel.
There'd be no Top Fuel today.
Englishtown Raceway Park. The event, the NHRA's Summer Nationals. The date, Saturday, July 12, 1986. A date that will go down in drag racing history, and another close call for Garlot. Garlot's latest car is the streamlined Swamp Rat 30. Making its debut at the 86 Gator Nationals, it was another innovative first for the old man. Streamlining wasn't new to drag racing, but it was Garlot's who made it work. Friday night qualifying. Crew Chief Herb Parks lines up Garlot's next to Gary Beck. Word in the pits is that Garlot's is going for a new record. Beck's motor dies, and the track belongs to Big Daddy. Big Daddy smashes the track record, a definite high point. The low point comes the next day.
We'd run 534 the night before, and Herb and I figured the car was capable of a 529. That's the number we had in our mind. We were going to run the first 520 in the history of the sport. So we hopped up the motor a little bit, richened the injector, never gave it a thought, the fact it was going to use a lot of fuel. They had rained on the track was completely clean. There was just a bad call on my part. We misjudged the traction of the strip. Should have had a little more weight on the front end. The injectors were using too much fuel, so the tank was about 2 gallons light before I left the line. There was a little situation of a fuel leak, and Herb held me there a little bit as he tightened it. All of this was contributing, and so consequently the tank's getting lighter and lighter. The car powered up about a foot and a half off the ground. Would have still been all right, but it accelerated so hard that the wind went under it and caused the car to get up too high. Well, then I lifted as it was up about 45 degrees. It should have stayed there and went on down, but it didn't. It was already moving so hard with that air under it, it went straight up, and I had no control over it, and over she went backwards. And I'll tell you what, I thought I was in big trouble. The car just slowly going up, and then all of a sudden it kind of took off. And I saw that whole thing happening because he was on a record pass. He was fixing to reset the national record, and if it wasn't for that wheel stand, he would have. Matter of fact, when he got to about halfway, I got real concerned, and it almost messed my run up because I was so concerned about his condition that I got the chutes out early and spun the car out around the return road, and I was climbing out of the car and heard the grandstand just go nuts when he got out of the car, so I knew it was okay. That was my main concern. Those people were witness to a 20th century miracle. When that car was up in the air, all I was doing was hanging on for dear life. I had nothing to do whatsoever with the way the car landed, the way it bounced, the way it stopped so quick because of the burnout backwards. I wasn't doing any of that. That's my guardian angel just looking out after me. And that's all I can say. What else can I say? I certainly wasn't driving the car. Here I am in one piece. I actually got out of the car on my own power. I could have been killed. I could have killed somebody. The car could have went into the crowd. It could have hit some safety crew people. It could have done anything. It didn't do any of that. It was just an unfortunate thing that happened. The car was fixed in about a week, and away we went. I mean, how simple could it have been?
He's the greatest drag racer that's ever lived. a living legend, a genuine American hero. He's the Pied Piper of drag racing and king of top fuel. Those who love the sport of drag racing are insatiable when it comes to Big Daddy. He is the sport. He is all the pain, joys, and sorrows. He is the highs and lows. He's the incredible speeds, quick ETs, the horsepower, and the show. But above all, he's the unbridled ferociousness of the competition.
He's the king of all the new inventions and all the new things. I mean, he's the king of the class. He's the king of everything.
I'd like to think of myself as an American hero. I mean, you know, the kids look up to me. I often call myself a Pied Piper of drag racing. Legend, no, that's not a term that I particularly like to use myself. You know, I've been around 35 years. And I guess the press, they use that term for someone that's had longevity like that. You've got an image that you're supposed to be keeping up. If you're a hero, you got to really be a hero. I know when I was a kid, growing up, my heroes were guys like Superman and Captain Marvel and Dick Tracy. And, you know, these guys stood for justice, right, tell the truth, patriotic American. These were my heroes, and it takes an effort to live up to any standard, because in our society, it's the, as it says in the Bible, you know, the gate is wide and the road is easy that leadeth to destruction, and narrow is the gate and narrow is the trail that leads to eternal life. And that's basically the way of life. If you want to live up to a particular standard, and it's a good standard, it's tough, because there's all kind of things out there, snares and traps waiting on you, and it's easy.
And Pat, did you think you'd be marrying a legend when you married this little boy back in Tampa, was it?
No, we were just a couple of young kids then.
Young kids, and now you're a couple of old kids?
Really? I guess so.
If there was one message that you'd want to get off, especially to the children, what would that be?
For the children, well, your life's in front of you, so you got to make the best out of it. And one of the ways to do that is to find Jesus Christ and live your life as a Christian, because that's the best way. It's not drugs or booze or partying. The true high is to be with Jesus Christ. There's nothing like it. And that's my recommendation.